Hello dear children, today we have to start our new story. You can see it is displayed on the screen also. The Old Man at the Bridge by Ernest Miller Hemingway. Okay, so before we start, we shall have introduction to the poet and the poem. For this, you can refer this book, Treasure Trove, and you may take out page number 47. I'll read out and explain. I hope it will be much clear to you. Ernest Miller Hemingway was an American novelist, short story writer, and journalist whose simple and understated writing was a strong influence on 20th century. One of the shortest of Ernest Hemingway's short stories, Old Man at the Bridge, is based upon an incident that took place during an Easter Sunday stopover at the Ebro River while Hemingway was a war correspondent covering the Spanish Civil War. Okay, so as in the second paragraph it is mentioned here about about the setting of the story, that is where the story has taken place actually. So there are two main characters in this story. One is the old man and the another one is the narrator. Okay, narrator is unnamed, so we can say that the writer itself, that Ernest Hemingway himself, is the narrator. Okay, so these are the two characters of the story, and where the story has taken place, it has taken place at Ebro River. There is a bridge. Okay, there is bridge. Which bridge? Pontoon Bridge. The name of the bridge, that is Pontoon Bridge. So there on the Pontoon Bridge, this old man is sitting and the conversation is going on between the old man and the narrator. And who is narrator? Narrator is he is an army scout, or we can say he is a soldier. He is war correspondent. Okay, war is going to take place. Which war? Spanish. It is given, that is Spanish Civil War. Okay, so Old Man at Bridge demonstrates the power of narrative art. That narrative art, how it demonstrates the power of narrative art, that narration is going on, we can say the conversation is going on between the two, and you can see the story is written mostly in conversational form. Okay, so it demonstrates the narrative art. Hemingway takes a small ordinary detail, it in a situation, and through the art of storytelling transforms it into a powerful story about the tragedy of war. The old man becomes a symbol of the countless civilian victims of war, those without politics. That is, it is given, the old man becomes a symbol of countless victims, civilian victims of war, those without politics. That is, whenever war take place, then so many innocent people are there, so many civilians are there, they don't have anything to do with the war, they don't have any kind of involvement in the politics, still they become the victims of war, still they become the sufferers. Then, displaced, disoriented and alone, he is faced with the inevitability of death. That is, this old man, as we will read the story and you will understand, so you will see that this old man who is there, he is displaced, that is, he has to leave his house and go somewhere else in order to take shelter, and then he is disoriented, that is completely, he doesn't know where to go, go and find shelter, and he is alone, that is, nobody is there to give him company. Okay, so he is faced with the inevitability of death, that finally he dies, he doesn't remain. Okay, so this is introduction to the poem, children. Now without wasting much time, we have to begin our class, that is story explanation. So for this I am switching off my camera so that you can focus on your class. Now I will read out these stanzas and I will explain you line by line. An old man with steel rimmed spectacles and very dusty clothes sat by the side of the road. There was a pontoon bridge across the river, and carts, trucks, and men, women, and children were crossing it. The mule drawn carts staggered up the steep bank from the bridge, with soldiers helping push against the spokes of the wheels. The trucks ground up and away, heading out of it. All the peasants plodded along in the ankle deep dust, but the old man sat there without moving. He was too tired to go any farther. Now, what is given? That an old man with steel rimmed spectacles and very dusty clothes sat by the side of the road. That is, an old man was there and he was wearing the spectacles made up of steel. Steel rimmed means that is having frames of steel. He was wearing that spectacles and very dusty clothes he was wearing, and he was sitting by the side of the road. So there was a pontoon bridge across the river, and carts, trucks, and men, women, and children were crossing it. Now, what is given? That there was a pontoon bridge. That where he was sitting, he was sitting on the bridge, and the bridge which was there, it was a pontoon bridge. Now, what is this pontoon bridge? Pontoon bridge means that is a bridge that is made of large hollow containers filled with air. Okay, that is the bridge which is made up of large hollow containers with air. And there was a pontoon bridge across the river, and carts and trucks and men, women, and children were crossing it. That is, so many people were there. They were going by their carts, trucks, and so many men, women, and children were there. They were crossing this pontoon bridge. And what this old man was doing, he was sitting on the roadside. The mule-drawn carts staggered up the steep bank from the bridge, with soldiers helping push against the spokes of the wheels. And now there were carts were also there, mule-drawn carts, that is the carts which were being pulled up by the mules. So they were crossing the bridge, and soldiers were also helping to push it and go easily. The trucks ground up and away, heading out of it. All the peasants plodded along in the ankle deep dust. That the peasants who were there, peasants means farmers, so they were going by walking, and the trucks which were there, they were going ahead, running fast and crossing the bridge. But the old man sat there without moving. But the old man, what was his condition? That he was sitting there without any movement. He was too tired to go any farther. Now, why he was not moving? Why he was not going? Because he was very much tired. And then, after this, it was my business to cross the bridge, explore the bridgehead beyond, and find out to what point the enemy had advanced. Now, what is given? That it is given that it was my business. Now, who speaks this? The narrator. Okay, narrator means Hemingway. So it was my business to cross the bridge, explore the bridgehead beyond, and find out to what point the enemy had advanced. So it was my business. Whose business it is? That is the war correspondent who is there. Who is the war correspondent fellow? It is the narrator himself, that the writer himself, Hemingway, Ernest Hemingway. So it was his work, his business means that is, it was his work to cross the bridge and to find out the bridgehead beyond, and find out to what point the enemy had advanced, because the Spanish civil war is going to take place, and his work was to see that how much ahead the enemy have come. So there were not so many carts now, and very few people on foot, but the old man was still there. Now, what is given? That there were not so many carts, there were not so many people, only very few people were there on foot, but the old man was still there. Now, why people were moving from this place? People were moving from this place because war was going to take place, and they were warned that if they do not leave the place, if they do not leave their homes and go to some safer place, then they can lose their lives. And now, what was the condition of the old man? He was still sitting there on the roadside, there at the bridge, because he was very tired. Now, see, conversation begins between the soldier, who is soldier, the narrator himself, and the old man. So, where do you come from? I asked him. So, who asked? Narrator asked the old man, where do you come from? Then he got reply, from San Carlos, he said, and smiled. Then the old man replied him, I have come from San Carlos. That was his native town, and so it gave him pleasure to mention it, and he smiled. Then, when the old man told him that he has come from San Carlos, he felt happy. Why he felt happy? Because it was his native town, and it gave him pleasure to mention about himself. So that's why he smiled. I was taking care of animals, he explained. Then, what else? The old man added, what else? He told the soldier that I was taking care of animals. Oh, I said, not quite understanding. Then the narrator who was there, what he replied? Oh, I said, not quite understanding. That is, I didn't understand. Yes, he said, I stayed, you see, taking care of animals. I was the last one to leave the town of San Carlos. Then the old man replied, yes. Yes means, that is, yes, I stayed there and I was taking care of animals. I stayed, you see, taking care of animals, and I was the last person to leave the town of San Carlos. He did not look like a shepherd nor a herdsman, and I looked at his black dusty clothes and his grey dusty face and his steel rimmed spectacles and said, what animals were they? Then now, narrator tells by looking at the appearance of this old man that he did not look like a shepherd, not like a herdsman, and I looked at his black dusty clothes and his grey dusty face and his steel rimmed spectacles and said, what animals were they? That is, the narrator who was there. So he looked very carefully on his appearance and then asked that what animals were they? To which you were giving care. Now, various animals, he said, and shook his head. I had to leave them. Then the old man replied, there were various animals, and he shook his head, and then he added, I had to leave them. That is, I was forced to leave them. I did not intend to leave them alone, but I had to leave and come alone. I was watching the bridge and the African looking country of the Ebro Delta and wondering how long now it would be before we would see the enemy, and listening all the while for the first noises that would signal that ever mysterious event called contact. And the old man still sat there. Now, what is there? That I was watching the bridge and the African looking country. That the narrator who was there, so he was watching the bridge and the African looking country of the Ebro Delta and wondering how long now it would be before we would see the enemy. That is, how much time gap is there, how much more time is left between the war to take place and now, and listening all the while for the first noises that would signal that ever mysterious event called contact. And the old man still sat there, that he was now waiting for the first noise that would give signal that yes, war has begun. So he was thinking about all these things. Meanwhile, the old man who was there, he was still sitting there. So what animals were they? I asked. Then the narrator again asked, having different thoughts in his mind, that what animals were they? And then There were three animals altogether, he explained. There were two goats and a cat, and then there were four pairs of pigeons. Then the old man replied, there were three animals altogether. He told him, there were two goats and a cat, and then there were four pairs of pigeons. And you had to leave them? I asked. Then the narrator, after knowing that these animals were there, so he asked, and you had to leave them? Yes, because of the artillery. The captain told me to go because of the artillery. Then the old man replied that yes, I had to leave them because of the artillery. Artillery here means because of the war, because war will soon begin and there is risks to life. So as there is risk to life, so I had to leave them. So the captain told me to go because of the artillery. And you have no family? I asked, watching the far end of the bridge where a few last carts were hurrying down the slope of the bank. Now, this narrator who was there, so he asked him more about him and asked that you don't have family. And at the same time, he was watching at the far end where few people were going by their cart very fast. No, he said. Then the old man replied that no, I don't have family, only the animals I stated. The cat of course will be all right. A cat can look out for itself, but I cannot think what will become of the others. What politics have you? I asked. Then after this,